Alright guys, time to crack here back again today. Hope you're enjoying your day so far, and well, we're a couple of weeks on now from that crazy news that came out a couple of weeks ago of Kevin Hidd over at the Esports Observer saying that Hector Rodriguez was looking to buy the OpTic Gaming Los Angeles spot off his own back, separate to the NRG organization, looking to potentially use that branding for the Chicago Huntsmen, and then, well, rebrand going forward and then sell the OpTic Gaming Los Angeles spot onto potential other investors, whether that be Nadeshot or whoever it might be. We now have news today, or at least coming out from Jake Lucky, that, well, potentially there's way more to the story, and the CDL are potentially denying this brand name change from Hector for the Chicago Huntsmen, and all the implications that that may involve, with even NRG selling the Huntsmen, buying OpTic Gaming Los Angeles. So much stuff to digest here, and we're going to hop into it in the coming minutes. Like, if you guys enjoy the video, subscribe if you are new. As always, I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Thank you for doing that. Before we get into it, just as you can see from this tweet thread right here, we were kind of, myself and Crow were discussing this before it actually went live, and well, I'd heard similar things from a source last night. I imagine the same source that Jake Lucky is talking about in his video that we'll look at a couple of clips of in a couple of minutes time. I've also heard from other people though that this may not be the case, so definitely keep in mind this is speculation. We've got some sources saying that this is 100% factual, some sources saying this is wrong, partially true, partially false. Who really knows right now? And of course, as Jake said in the video, it's business. Things can certainly change over the coming weeks. Don't expect all of this stuff to come true, but still very interesting to discuss some of the possibilities that are going on behind the scenes right now. So as we can see, the Esports Observer a couple of weekends ago discussed this about how Hector reacquired the OpTic Gaming Los Angeles on his own back, and really the discussion that we had at the time was, it seems pretty likely to me that he's going to try and use this to bring the OpTic Gaming branding over to the Chicago Huntsmen, that kind of brand that he built, and we talked about some of the implications from that. Just a quick timeline of OpTic Gaming if you guys are unfamiliar. Back in 2007, Hector becomes the CEO. Then if we fast forward all the way through to 2019, this is where things kind of kicked off. Immortals Gaming Club acquired OpTic Gaming's parent company, Infinite Esports. Hector had sold his majority stake to Infinite Esports, who were then acquired by Immortals, and then you can see, well, really in September, that's where everything kicked off. Hecz then leaves as the CEO of OpTic Gaming, becomes the co-CEO of NRG, and they start this new brand, Chicago Huntsmen, which has become the, well, the biggest name in the league, and of course bringing Scump over to that brand as well, and some other big name players on that organization. That really is the big question mark to me right now, that if, well, Hector decided that OpTic Gaming Los Angeles, or at least OpTic Gaming as the brand, is something that he built, that's like his baby in a sense, if he can't bring that to Chicago, does he then, well, does he give up on the deal? Does he just sell OGLA onto someone else, maybe take a bit of a loss in the process? And of course that brings the question up, like, why would Hector even buy OpTic Gaming Los Angeles if he didn't know if the CDL would approve that naming change? And yeah, if that doesn't happen, he just has to sell it on for a massive loss or whatever. That wouldn't be an ideal situation for Hector. I'd have imagined he'd have done more due diligence than that. And then of course the other question is, well, if he does really want to go to OpTic Gaming, the problem is that Scump and Co are all signed to the Chicago Huntsmen for next season. He can't just leave, well, he can't just like sell Chicago Huntsmen as a team on NRG, buy OpTic Gaming Los Angeles, and then all of a sudden like bring all those guys over. These guys are contracted to the Huntsmen. Whoever potentially buys out the Chicago Huntsmen, if that is the implication, as we'll look at in a couple of minutes time, you know, like they're obviously going to still be contracted to the organization. Does Hector, even with the power of the OpTic Gaming brand, want to go to OGLA and now own that organization, and then well, take on like Slasher and Kenny and TJ and all of these guys that aren't his family in that sense? So yeah, very confusing to me, quite frankly. This is a breakdown of some of the key points. So the CDL deny Hex's attempted Huntsman rebrand to OpTic Gaming, so I imagine he tried to become like OpTic Gaming Chicago, you know, Chicago OpTic, something to that effect, as we talked about. That would make sense. The CDL apparently denying that, saying that, well, look, if you're the Huntsman brand that's associated with Chicago, that's going to stay there. The OpTic Gaming brand is not allowed to leave LA. The Huntsman brand is not allowed to leave Chicago. That's just how it is, which is, well, somewhat confusing to me. Maybe they're just doing this as a one-off situation, given that Huntsmen are like the biggest brand in the league, right? Do they want to lose their biggest brand and that brand just to completely disappear 1 year in? And, you know, even if that would mean that OpTic Gaming come back to Chicago, and or at least come back to those guys, and all of a sudden then that's obviously like a bigger brand and has so much brand power behind it as it's had over a number of years, and well, maybe the CDL still doesn't want to lose the Huntsmen, even given all those situations. Then we've got the implication that NRG may sell the Huntsmen to new owners and purchase OpTic Gaming Los Angeles. If then, well, if this is denied from Hector, then he's like, well, okay, what's the second best opportunity here? Do I take OpTic Gaming Los Angeles as kind of just like a content team and use that, you know, use OGLA as the branding? But then again, if the CDL are also saying that, well, OpTic as a brand can never leave Los Angeles, I imagine Hector can't exactly do that, right? So that would leave the other option on the table as to, well, sell the Chicago Huntsmen to a new investor and purchase OGLA. You certainly can't own both, right? So, yeah, I mean, this would be remarkable, because of course the implication of that would be that he'd have to leave Scump and Co, because they're signed to the Huntsmen. So if he goes to OGLA, then he would have to team with these new guys, which seems like something which would just never happen to me. I just can't see this, frankly, being the case. To me, the fact that he's going to be leaving Scump and Co, even with the intention intention of maybe signing them next season. But if that's the intention, what sort of a deal are they going to get from the new investors, right? So a new investor group comes in, they buy out Chicago Huntsmen, Hecz and Co go over to, well, you know, Hector and Andy Miller and the NRG guys buy out OGLA with the intention that they're just going to sell on all those guys from that team after the end of this season and then buy in Scump and Co, right? Like the new investor group over at the Huntsmen is going to charge them a pretty penny, you can be sure of that. And, you know, can they even get an arrangement like this in place, given that all the guys that would potentially be competing on OGLA next season already know that they're going to be out the door, right? So, you know, so many questions around this. The last point is on 100 Thieves potentially wanting OGLA, but I wanted to discuss that in more detail tomorrow because there's, well, so much to digest. I'll play a couple of minutes here of Jake's video just to, well, explain this in a little bit greater detail.
But it gets even crazier from what I've been told about the league being very tricky with these dealings. It seems that the league itself may not even allow the OpTic brand to leave the city of LA. That would mean some pretty crazy stuff for the future. Apparently the league is actually making it so these brands have to stay with their established cities, meaning the Huntsmen would have to stay in Chicago and OpTic would have to stay in LA, which means that I've been told NRG would in fact acquire the OGLA team and spot and thus sell the Chicago Huntsmen to anyone else or a newcomer or a new round of investors who wants to come into the league. Yes, I just said that, something that I honestly I don't think I really saw coming. Apparently Hecz might have wanted, or, you know, supposedly did want Chicago OpTic to be a thing, was not allowed by the league because OpTic apparently has to stay with that LA branding. And so with that being said, NRG has to acquire the OGLA spot and with it OpTic Gaming and sell the Chicago Huntsmen to any newcomers who would possibly want it. Now, that does not mean a newcomer has to take the Huntsman branding, but you can imagine currently the #1 most popular Call of Duty brand is the Chicago Huntsman. So the giant question would be, if you're a new investor or a newcomer into the CDL, would you want to buy the Chicago Huntsman, which ironically would make this somewhat of an OpTic round 2 with Hecz not being there. If you guys don't understand what I mean by that, when Immortals Gaming Club first bought OpTic Gaming and did not get Hecz and the boys to go with them, it failed. I think a lot of us can agree it failed under Immortals because it did not have Hecz, it did not have the boys, and thus it was not OpTic, and now someone might be doing the same exact thing with the Chicago Huntsmen.
So I'm very intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below on this one. What do you think are going to be the next steps here for both of these brands, right? Is Hector going to consider this? Is this even going on? Is this complete fake news and maybe none of this will ever happen, right? Because it does seem somewhat strange to me that Hector would come in here buying the OpTic Gaming Los Angeles brand without knowing that he'd be able to rebrand the Huntsman, right? If that's his intention and he goes to OpTic, you know, he goes to the CDL and says, look, I want to become Chicago OpTic or whatever, you know, whatever the situation may exactly be, would the CDL deny that? I mean, I suppose they can. Then again, you know, think of all the loopholes they did for Atlanta FaZe, for example, considering that FaZe Clan and Atlanta FaZe are two different brands, therefore they can still exist in the CDL. I'm sure, like, you know, Hector and Hastra especially feel somewhat hard done by given how powerful their brands were before they had to create new brands. So, you know, understandable that they'd want to get rid of that if you're Hector, right? Like, hey, we built Huntsman for a season, it is what it is. It is what it is, but if I can bring the intellectual property of OpTic back here, yes, maybe it feels a bit bad for the CDL, the fact that Hecz and Co have built the biggest brand in the CDL, that being the Huntsman, and then that brand would be completely dissolved, but at the same time, right, it allows a new investor, for example, coming into OpTic or coming into Los Angeles to actually build their own brand. They wouldn't have to purchase OpTic Gaming Los Angeles, they could purchase, because of course OGLA as a brand right now is a bit questionable, right? Like, do you want to buy OGLA off Hector if he just sells it as OGLA? Because you know what happened with Immortals, right? That OGLA are no longer, like, it's no longer the OpTic Gaming of the past, it's not associated with OpTic Gaming, it's like fake OpTic or whatever. Do you really want to be associated with that brand and spend $25 million on a spot? Do you imagine that the competitive Call of Duty's perceptions are going to change in coming years? Maybe you don't. Maybe you'd actually prefer as a new investor to come in and actually just have LA, you know, just as it is, and if you're a Natural or someone like that, come in and make it LA Thieves, and then don't have to worry about the OpTic Gaming Los Angeles brand. So strange to me that the CDL would just decide, look, OGLA is staying as OGLA in Los Angeles, and Chicago Huntsman is staying as Chicago Huntsman in Chicago, and there's nothing you're going to do about it. You know, even given that long term, that may actually be a better thing for the CDL if that was to happen. But of course, with all this being said, the fact that Hector might leave Scump & Co is just a big question mark to me. The fact that NRG could sell the Huntsman and purchase OGLA is, well, a huge question mark, and I honestly can't imagine that happening. I think it's more likely, frankly, that Hector finds a way to just sell on OpTic Gaming Los Angeles and cut his losses or something to another organization than he would actually decide to, well, to leave Scump & Co, even if it was for for a season? I don't know. So many questions on this one. Very intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and learned something new. If you did enjoy it, I'd greatly appreciate a like on the video. It really helps out the YouTube algorithm to know you enjoyed this content. Other people like you may enjoy this content as well and help grow the Call of Duty community. Thank you as always. Take care, and I will see you next time.